What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. On today's episode, we talk about Texas and Oklahoma officially joining the SEC and how it directly impacts the South Carolina Gamecocks. We also talk with our good buddy Chris Gordy from LockedON SEC to see what the perception of the Gamecocks is around the league heading into the 2024 season. Locked On Gamecocks starts now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. It's great to have you along. We are joined by a good buddy and special guest today, Chris Gordy. It's great to have all of you here. I'm Chris Marler. I'll address the elephant in the room later. Obviously, there's a new host. It's a new era, not only for the SEC with Texas and OU joining, but also for Locked On Gamecocks, as I have taken over for our good friend Andrew Lyon, who did a tremendous job with this. Thanks for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Let's jump in the show. Now, first and foremost, Chris Gordy, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. I just got back from, was out in Austin, Texas for the University of Texas having their big celebration entering the SEC. I know Oklahoma just had theirs on Monday, and it's kind of cool, kind of weird, kind of intriguing, kind of everything. You know, the SEC, it's a new age with new teams coming in. And I've been telling everybody, be careful what you wish for, because, you know, you want conference expansion, great. But I always say, like, you want conference expansion, let's add Wake Forest. Let's add, West Virginia. Let's add some teams that are beatable. Instead, you go back, add two behemoths like Texas and Oklahoma. Don't be upset when your schedule starts taking more L's.
You know, honestly, I couldn't agree more. I think it's an exciting time. I think that I've said this for the last couple of years, and that is when you talk about two teams like this coming in, I think it's a great fit for the conference in terms of, okay, listen, it's two fan bases with a rich tradition. They prioritize football. They have a great athletic department and program, and a lot of other sports outside of football. It's something we can obviously associate with here in South Carolina. When you have women's basketball, you have Lamont Paris and everything he did last year, men's basketball, baseball a couple years ago. I fully enjoy the fact that this will be a well-rounded addition to the league. What it's also going to do is going to lower that ceiling for some teams that have 8 or 9 wins. It seems like it's hard to get over that hump. I think it's like you said, it's all fine and it's all fun and games until you sit there and realize you have like a bottleneck at the top of this conference trying to get into even a 12-team playoff with a bunch of teams with 10-2 records. I will say, if you were in Austin, just tell us the vibes of what was going on in Austin, because this is a fan base and an administration and a program, I'm talking about Texas, that has prided itself on always being bigger than anything else, bigger than the conference, bigger than any other program, bigger than any other entity in college football. And they celebrated not just like they didn't celebrate a national championship. They celebrated joining a conference. Right. And they did it by throwing a Pitbull concert with several 100,000 people. What were the vibes like at this Pitbull Texas extravaganza?
Well, I'll say, I think maybe at least 40% of the crowd was there just for Pitbull. So, you know, that probably takes part of it out. But, I mean, hella great on them for booking Pitbull, because, you know, I don't know, would Michael McDonald have brought out the same crowd? I don't know. But
why was that your example? Why would Michael McDonald? You're going to be there.
You know, because like Matchbox 20, would they have brought out a huge crowd? You know, maybe not as much as Pitbull. So I saw some posts on social media. One girl said, "I'm here just for Pitbull." So again, like, it's people did come just for the concert, but no, it felt like a game day atmosphere. I mean, it really did. I joked with Greg Sankey. I said, "What time's the game kickoff?" Like, it felt like, because it was hot. It had all the feelings of a game day. There was booze being handed out. There's vendors everywhere selling beer and everything, and everybody's walking around with a cocktail. Like, it felt like we're counting down to something. And the only thing you were counting down to was an announcement that we've joined the SEC officially, and then a Pitbull concert. So, no, it is very interesting, Marla. I wonder the perspective of had this been 2 years ago, right, when the announcement first came out, Brent Zwerneman of the Houston Chronicle first leaked it, Texas went 5-7 that year. Would the excitement be, what it is right now? Because what I'm hearing and seeing from a lot of Texas fans on social media and, what I saw in person is they're very cocky and, maybe arrogant's not the word, but confident in their team. And they expect to come in and beat up in the SEC. They expect to come in and push their weight around. And yeah, it's easy to say that when you're coming off of a 12-2 season versus 5-7. So the timing is very interesting. They're coming in thinking that they got a chance to come steamroll everybody, but it will be very interesting to see, what they actually do, because, the whole moniker of Texas is back. Well, we've heard this before. We heard it with Tom and Sam Ellinger were there, but are they really back? That's the big question.
Yeah, I think that again, in kind of keeping with the theme of how does this directly impact South Carolina and like in other teams on the SEC, of course, because it's a massive, massive change. But I keep thinking about going back to how it impacts South Carolina specifically. And I think South Carolina probably falls into that category of the teams that have maybe a ceiling over their head over the past couple of years. And like, how do you get past it? How do you break through that ceiling? But here's the other thing too, is that you hit the nail on the head with Texas. I fully understand their fan base coming in, beating their chests and how proud they are, because they've always been like that. But this is a team, and I'm talking about football specifically. They've played at a much weaker conference for the last several decades. They only won 4 football titles in the Big 12. And that includes last season, right? Like you go into I get they went 12-2 last year. They made the college football playoff. They have a huge win on the road against Alabama. Like, that's all great. But let's not forget about the fact that in the last 10 seasons combined, this is a team and a program that has lost a minimum of 3 conference games in a crappy Big 12, 8 of those 10 years. This is not a program that has been dominant. And really, they've had 4 losing seasons over the last 14 years, which is the same amount as Mississippi State. They've had double the amount of losing seasons since 2010 as they've had 10 win seasons since that same time period. How do you think this addition, and I'm specifically talking about Texas there, but how do you think this addition with OU and Texas directly impacts teams like South Carolina or Kentucky or Mississippi State, teams that fall into that kind of category in the tiers of the SEC?
Well, I put South Carolina kind of in that middle category of teams,
right?
Probably with Kentucky's and with Arkansas and, probably, above Mississippi State right now, but,
sure.
But expect, they'll get back with Jeff Lebby. But I put them in that conglomeration of teams of the minimum should be 6-6. And that's where Shane Beamer, I thought, came up short last year. Was the schedule tough? Yes. But 5-7, come on, man. You lost all the wind out of your sails from the year before, seeing him douse himself with the Duke's Mayo Bowl and all that. You were recruiting well. You had Spencer Rattler came back for another year. You had all these expectations. And I said it all last summer. I said, you got to address that offensive line. And they didn't get better. And Spencer Rattler, when he had time to throw, he was awesome. When he didn't, he was getting murdered. And we saw that week 1 against, North Carolina, getting thrown around. So, I say all that to say, I think at minimum, the Gamecocks expectation each year should be at minimum 6-6. And can we do better? Now, this year, you're working in LaNoris Sellers. What is LaNoris? We don't know. We're going to find out as the season goes along what his ceiling is. Does he go through growing pains? Does he, all this is to be determined. But I do think it is a new age in the SEC, though. With the expansion, with the 2 new teams, comes the playoff expansion. Right. And whereas the norm used to be for the SEC, you want to go 12-0 or 11-1 and get to Atlanta and win the win the SEC title. The expectation now is, can you get to 10-2? 10-2 in the SEC get you into the playoff. And so I think for those teams like South Carolina, it's more realistic now. If you can take a huge leap forward, if you could get some consistency out of the quarterback spot, if you can get an improved defense, I think you end up saying, look, the goal's 10-2. Can we go from 6 wins to 10 wins? Right. And 10 wins gets us into the playoff. I think that is where, South Carolina's expectation should be. But, we'll get into it, maybe a little bit later in the show. But that October stretch that they have is absolutely brutal. But if you pull a miracle out of that and split those 4 tough games from October into the first week of November, who knows, man? Maybe this team could be a shocker and surprise some people.
I will say this, the thing that I know I'm going to see from South Carolina, like the thing that I'm very, very confident in saying is, I don't know if they're going to go out and beat Oklahoma in year one. I don't know if they're going to go out and beat some of the other teams on that difficult stretch or go on the road in Tuscaloosa and beat them. But when it comes to Oklahoma and Texas coming in to the SEC, I know one thing I'm not going to see from South Carolina is they're not going to flinch. Like they're not going to be scared of the moment or scared of these two brands just because the logo on the side of the helmet. Like this is a team that's been in the SEC for over 30 years now and plays against Georgia and Clemson every single year. So like the schedule's always been brutal, right? It's like Auburn. It's they're like from a scheduling standpoint, it's the Auburn of the SEC East. Like the schedule is the schedule, and it's always been brutal. But I agree with you. What can LaNoris Sellers be like? What can they do from a receiver standpoint, which we are going to get into in the next segment? But I also think this, when you talk about the fact that they have the issue last year with the offensive line, I said this when Spencer Rattler came from Oklahoma to South Carolina, the thing that he was going to struggle with the most was the way they had developed and recruited on the offense, or I'm sorry, recruited and developed in that order on the offensive line at South Carolina versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma was very SEC ready when it came to the trenches. And when Spencer Rattler was there, they had, at the time that he left, they had 11 offensive line recruits that were ranked 4 stars or better. And then you looked at what South Carolina had at the time, and I believe it was 1 or 2 at the very most when he first went there 2 years ago. Now, they've done a better job. Like they've gone to the portal, and they've gotten 3 or 4 guys out of the portal. They recruited a very high 4-star, some he's a 5-star in some publications from last year going into this year. So they should have some depth and some actual star power in the offensive line. But that is where you have to get better to start for South Carolina is up front.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, I feel like a broken record. I've been saying that for a couple of years now. And, I feel like, that they've got a couple of seniors, a couple of freshmen that played last year that are going to be sophomores. So, it's all about consistency. And if that's, the other dynamic here too is LaNoris Sellers has feet. He's got mobility. So maybe it's not as important this year as it was for Spencer Rattler last year. Yeah. It was more of a pocket guy. So, and here's an idea for a later show for you, Marler. I can make a case. What if LaNoris Sellers has a Johnny Manziel-like year? I know people are going to go, oh my God, dude, what's this idiot talking about? But like, I can make a case. What if he's awesome? What if he takes the SEC by storm? I mean, it raises everybody's expectations on what South Carolina can be.
Dude, and again, I'll tell you this. I think that like I don't know what he can be on a 12-game sample size. We none of us do, because he hasn't had that yet. But what I do think, from I look at the makeup of this team, I love when South Carolina is kind of laying in the weeds, and they're not like a front runner. They're not picked to do all this stuff. Like they don't have the same expectations as they did maybe going into last year, Spencer Rattler. I love the fact they got Robbie Ashford with some depth. Like that kid will do something. He will do something in this offense, right? He's too good of an athlete to keep out the field. But I just think that LaNoris Sellers, at the very least, they're going to jump up and get somebody. All right, we will continue to talk about South Carolina and the perception of the Gamecocks around the SEC with our good buddy Chris Gordy in our next segment. But first, listen, I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, wherever I want. All I have to do is open up the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, daily. There is something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, guys, we're back here with Locked On Gamecocks. Listen, are y'all watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Hopefully you did not have to watch FS1 in that U.S. men's national game last night from the Goodyear Blimp. That was a tough scene for everyone. Do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Do you have to make this? God, mother, we're going to start it over here. Gordy did too much.
You don't have to read it word for word, I'm
going to read it word for word. You shut up. Don't make me overthink it even more than I already am. All right, 3, 2, 1. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Locked On Gamecocks. Hey, listen, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Listen, make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are back here for our second segment of our interview here with Chris Gordy. And today we are talking about, obviously, Texas and OU and the impact they have on the SEC, and also with South Carolina. But I also want to know about going into the season, going into 2024 and the football season we have coming up. What is the perception of South Carolina maybe around the league? There's no one better to address that with our buddy Chris Gordy from LockedON SEC. Gordy, just going into this year, we've talked a little bit about some expectations, what we want to see out of the Gamecocks, but what is the perception of South Carolina from around the league, from fan bases and programs both?
Well, I think the big thing is, we already touched on it, is LaNoris Sellers. And, I know a lot of Gamecock fans are excited about him and what he can do. But that's going to be the big part, is how good can he be? And, what can he do on the field? Like, can he help elevate this team? Now, the biggest question mark is going to be wide receiver. I mean, you've got a lot of unprovens there. You got several guys coming in through the transfer portal, like Jared Brown from Coastal Carolina, Gage Lavardin and Amari Huggins-Spurs from Louisville. It's a lot of new faces. The big one still is, what is Nick Harbor? I mean, this was the big 5-star dude that everybody had high hope for, and we saw some glimpses. But even in the spring, I mean, he was running track, and it's like, when is he going to get that chemistry down with LaNoris Sellers, and they start to develop? And I just feel like that's a guy who needs 5, 6, 7 targets a game. Like, just get the ball in his hands and let him go, and hopefully something special happens out of it. The crazy part is, though, Marler, I mean, Josh Simon's back at tight end, and he was your 4th leading receiver last year. He's your leading returnee as a receiver. I mean, it's all new pass catchers. And so when I talk to people around the league about South Carolina, that's the biggest thing they ask is, who's going to catch the football? Like, again, it's not that they don't have weapons. They do. It's just a lot of unprovens in this system and what they could do. Again, to me, it starts with Nick Harbor. Another one is, what's Luke Doty's role, right? I mean, we've seen him kind of make that transition around. Like, they've used him almost in every different position on the field. So going to be interesting, with him. They got to run the football. This team is just, they've struggled to run the football the last couple of years. Who was my guy a couple of years ago? Was it Marcus Harris? Whoever it was. Anyway, the guy I loved. He ended up with the New England Patriots, but they haven't run the football consistently since then. And Rocket Sanders comes in from Arkansas. I mean, he is just a walking injury. Just like, dude, when are you ever going to get healthy? It's always like, wait till he gets healthy. But I like the Oscar Attaway addition from North Texas. I like Juwan Hall.
Kevin Harris, by the way.
Kevin Harris, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because he, 2020, that 2020 season, the COVID year, he was like the second leading rusher in the SEC behind Najee Harris.
Yeah, 2020 feels like it was 25 years ago. But anyway, Kevin Harris, no disrespect to him, but was one of my favorite, honestly, was one of my favorite backs to watch in the SEC during that time. And they've struggled to find that guy since then. But Juwan Howell from South Carolina State comes in too. So whatever it is, if it's running back by committee, whatever they got to do to make this thing work, find a way to make it work. But to me, that's the biggest question when I talk to people around the league is, who's going to be that leading receiver? Who's going to step up at wide receiver for South Carolina? And losing Xavier Legette, who, I mean, awesome. He becomes a 1st-round pick. That's great. Yeah. But you lose Juice Wells to the portal, it goes over to Ole Miss, and it's just like, they've kind of done a good job of, okay, who's that next guy to step up? And they've always had a guy step up. It's just the question is, we don't know who that is right now.
Yeah, honestly, I think that for me, I'm excited because it does feel like there's at least a little bit. I'm not downplaying losing Xavier Legette. You don't. I think with the way the roster is right now, and I don't mean this in a negative way to how Shane Beamer's recruited or anything like this, but like, there's very few rosters and teams in this country, and especially in the SEC, that replace 1st-round talent like it's nothing. Like, especially at receiver at a skill position like that. But with South Carolina, you do kind of have a feeling of who is going to be the next guy up, because it sucks that Juice Wells has gone to Ole Miss. It sucks that he kind of quit on the team last year, in my opinion, from everything we saw on the outside looking in. It kind of sucks that, you lose a 1st-round pick in Xavier Legette. But dude, like, nobody knew who Josh Vann was in 2021, 2022. We didn't know any of that. We didn't, like, Jaheim Bell was kind of like a nobody at some point. Like I think that there's part of you that feels like somebody is going to be that guy. And I'm not just saying that that's just how it is in this offense. And it's, next man up, you replace and whatever. But I do kind of feel like there's going to be somebody that will emerge, because that's just been the pattern that's happened, especially under Shane Beamer since he's been in Columbia. Now, the guy I want it to be, admittedly, like this is day one on this podcast for me. You're going to hear me bang the drum for this guy more than anyone else. There's not going to be a bigger Nick Harbor fan, I think, outside of his parents than me. Because that's what we love to see as like fans, is like there's a freak athlete on that roster. Get him the football. Like, as you said, 7 times a game, dude, make it double digits. Like give him double digit targets, because that's a guy that is a absolute physical mismatch. And it's crazy to me still that it wasn't until the A&M game last year where we saw him finally start getting some targets and some catches. And maybe it's because he just didn't understand the offensive system they were in as much or whatever. But I'll never forget this, man. Lane Kiffin, there's just one of my favorite stories. I tell it all the time on our own podcast on Fourth and Wrong. But like the Lane Kiffin story, when he gets asked to be an analyst at Alabama after they kick 6, and they bring him in before the Sugar Bowl and they're about to play Oklahoma. And they ask him, what would you do differently in this offense? And Lane Kiffin goes to the board and he draws 5 numbers up on the board. And it's like Derrick Henry, TJ Yeldon, OJ Howard, a couple other, studs like that. And it's like, these are your 5. And I think the other one was Amari Cooper. And it was like, these are your best playmakers. Get them the ball. It's simple. And Nick Harbor, I don't know yet if he's one of their best playmakers because he hasn't had the opportunity to be yet. But I do know that he is one of the best athletes, not only on the field for South Carolina, but in the conference, in the country, because of just his physical tools and the God-given ability he's been given.
Yeah, and look, there should be some other guys to keep an eye on too that they've brought in through the transfer portal. I think there was a kid from Nevada, Campbell, the FSU kid Jacobs. I want to say, there's other names to keep an eye on of guys that could make an impact. But that's another thing we need to give Shane Beamer credit for is, Lane Kiffin gets all the credit, the king of the transfer portal and all this. I think, Shane Beamer's done a pretty good job of addressing a lot of needs through the transfer portal this offseason. So we'll see how many of these guys end up coming in and contributing immediately. But, they lose a couple guys to, the draft and graduation and all that. One thing that's kind of underrated, and one of the guys we had on the show a couple times the last few years, was DeCarrion Joyner. He was just an awesome leader behind the scenes, a guy that was everything that embodied the spirit of a South Carolina Gamecock. And so, it's not just the playmakers and the guys on the field, but who's going to be the leader in the locker room? Who's going to be that guy in tough moments in a game who's going to step up and say, hey, get me the ball. Let's make this happen. So there's all that kind of stuff, intangible stuff that goes with it. But again, if LaNoris lives up to the hype, maybe he's that guy, leads by example, gets it done on the field, and it's something you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a tough loss in a number of ways. It's sure they led the team in rushing touchdowns a year ago. I tell you what's kind of scary thought from that is that the guy behind him, who finished second in the team in rushing touchdowns last year, was Spencer Rattler. So, and the number was only 4. So, hopefully that number goes up with a guy like LaNoris Sellers, but we'll see.
But a lot of those were goal line plays. And think of this, with LaNoris and his running ability and Robbie Ashford and his running ability, I think you got plenty of opportunities for option plays, quarterback sneaks. I mean, if they can just get to the goal line, I think the opportunities are endless.
Yeah, I completely agree. Last question before we get you out of here, Gordy, and thank you again for the time. We really appreciate it. Perception of South Carolina around the league yesterday on 3, and our buddy Jesse Simonson came out with a ranking of coaches on the hot seat. Shane Beamer was 5th. I thought it was interesting. You had 1 through 5. I think 1 was Sam Pittman. 2, you had Billy Napier. 3 was Kalen DeBoer. 4 was Clark Lee. And then 5 was Shane Beamer. Do you think that that's accurate? Do you think that Beamer at 5 is too high, too low, just right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, to me, it goes back to first things first. What's he doing in recruiting? And he's doing a really good job there. And so I think you always get a little bit of leniency there. I talked about when Sark went 5-7 his first year at Texas. One of the big things, there were people around the program saying, "Oh God, this is a disaster. We got rid of Tom Herman for this." One of the big things they said is, "Oh, he's got Arch Manning coming in. Let's see this thing out. Let's see how he keeps recruiting." It's very interesting at Florida. We know Billy Napier is on a scalding hot seat. The schedule's absolutely brutal for Florida, but the one big thing he had going for him was recruiting. He brought in DJ Lagway, big 5-star quarterback. And the fear is you fire Billy Napier, you'll lose DJ Lagway to the portal. The interesting thing here is with South Carolina, let's say, some of these recruits start to come in and make an impact in year one, and then the big commits he's already got for next year. Do you risk losing those pieces
right
if you move on from a Beamer? Look, nobody's happy about how this thing regressed from 8-5 and 22 to 5-7 last year. But in the conference, you went from 4-4 to 3-5. I mean, it wasn't like you fell off the map in terms of conference play. It was, a couple of non-conference games, and obviously the game against Clemson everybody loves. But I just wonder, look, if we're going to go in a 9-game conference schedule, is it worth keeping that rivalry game? Because it's a potential L every season for Shane Beamer. Why not replace that one with, go play South Carolina upstate and, call it a W every year? So we'll see. But yeah, I'm very interested to see. I think if he goes another 5-7 this year, the schedule is brutal. So you got to take that into consideration. But if, how does it look? If it's 5-7 and the 7 losses, 6 of them are absolute blowouts. You get bludgeoned on the road at Alabama. You get murdered on the road at Oklahoma. You lose to Ole Miss by 6 touchdowns. I mean, if it gets really, really ugly, then maybe. But I still think you see this thing out. The goal is to get to at least 6-6. If you do that, you get to a bowl game, you put together another foundational recruiting class. I feel like, at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel coming down the road.
You heard it here first, guys. Gordy wants to get rid of the Clemson-South Carolina rivalry so Clemson can be replaced with USC Upstate. Former Peach Belt, Division II conference member and an opponent of yours truly from Georgia College State University. Gordy, we appreciate you coming on, man. Help me walk through this first episode. Tell everyone where they can find you and all your stuff and your Social Security address or Social Security number as well. Times are tight. This economy is rough.
It's 471. No, it's LockedON SEC, wherever you get your podcasts. And, Andrew and I did some crossovers the last couple of years. He did a great job, and going to be fun to hear what you got to say about the Gamecocks living in that area and seeing it up close. And hopefully you become boys with Shane Beamer. You can get some more insider access over there.
We love it. We appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, see ya.
All right, we appreciate Gordy coming on. We will close out the show with a little bit of a get to know me and introduce myself. Obviously, the elephant in the room, since there is a new host for the show as we head into the 2024 season. I appreciate you guys joining us. Make sure you stay tuned for the last and closing segment of Locked On Gamecocks. All right, guys. So let's close out the show today. Kind of address the elephant in the room, like I said. My name is Chris Marler. I am the new host of Locked On Gamecocks. I could not be more excited about the opportunity to run this show, engage with this fan base, and talk about South Carolina sports on a daily basis. I want to say first and foremost, thank you so much to Andrew Lyon and the tremendous job that he did running this show, growing this brand, and interacting with his fans for the last several years. Just an incredible job. Can't say thank you enough, not just for how helpful he's been in this transition, how selfless he's been in helping me kind of like learning and understanding some of the things and the things that he's already put into place. And then also thanking him for leaving this situation in such a tremendous state where it should be, we just pick up and keep things moving and in a successful way, thanks to him and all of his hard work that he already put in here. Now, listen, here's the one thing I will say. I love Andrew to death. He's been super nice to me. I'm not Andrew. And I understand fully well that, like, we're not always going to agree on stuff, guys. We're just not. But I will tell you, sometimes we might adamantly disagree on things. That's kind of the beauty of sports and being able to talk about it for a living. But I will tell you this. One thing I will guarantee you, we might not always agree, but I will show up every blanking day for you and this show and give you as my best, the best analysis, news, coverage, and objectivity that I can on a daily basis. That I can promise you. A little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Chris Marler. I have been covering college football for about a decade now. Professionally, I've spent the last 6 years at Saturday Down South covering SEC football, running their social media, running their podcasts, being in charge of their fan engagement and their brand growth as well. Currently, I work for ESPN and Guarantee Media, and helping with their stations out of Baton Rouge, covering the SEC and doing video production for them as well. Why South Carolina? I've lived off and on in the state for the last 20 years. I'm from Atlanta originally. Went to school, played baseball in college at a place called Georgia College and State University. Went to Middle Tennessee State out of high school. Hated it. It's a dry campus, not for me. We don't have to get into that, but just not the best and most fun. But I went to Georgia College and State University. If you haven't heard of it, 2 keys. It's where Roethlisberger got in all that trouble for one, and then 2. It's also they played in the same conference as USC Upstate before, like I mentioned, USC Aiken, Francis Marion, some of those schools like that. Currently, I live in Lexington, South Carolina. My mom is a pastor here in Lexington, South Carolina. My sister graduated from USC in 2020, and my dad ran the Alsco plants off UG Street for roughly 20 years before retiring last summer. Hopefully, I got some street cred with Carolina fans, as I said UG and not Huger, like an idiot. But listen, here's the deal. College football has been my favorite thing since I was a kid, since I was 4 years old. I wake up every day. I yearn to talk about this stuff. I cannot wait to be able to talk to you guys about college football, college sports, South Carolina sports all year round, because one of the beauties of this specific role and this specific job is, unlike a lot of other schools in the SEC, it's not just a football school. There's a lot of stuff happening in the University of South Carolina that will make this a year-round fun follow. And I can't wait. So I don't think I left anything out. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks to Locked On. Like I said, thank you to Andrew Lyon for all of his help as well. And any questions you guys have for me, reach out to me on social media, Vern Funquist CFB. I do this. Like I said, I work with ESPN Baton Rouge, and I also have another podcast called Fourth and Wrong as well with a buddy of mine that I've known since college. So that is all for today's episode. I cannot say thank you enough for joining us. We have a fun week. It's an odd week because it's July 4th. So a lot of you guys will be traveling, maybe be going down my neck of the woods over here at Lake Murray. But I appreciate you guys listening in. I cannot wait to go on this journey with you guys. And that being said, listen, let me close out the show. Let me tell you this. Locked On has launched the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV as well in the free Fire TV channels app. Make sure you guys go check that out. Make sure you go check out all of our other shows. Gordy Show, Locked On SEC as well. Locked On Sports Today is here for you for 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts on Locked On Plus. Our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much, guys.